Angeles. My name is Andrew McGregor, and I have the prodigious privilege of serving as first vice president this year. We are an organization that for the past 100 plus years has met just about every Thursday to discuss and disseminate adventure and life off the beaten path. We're kind of like explorers, mountain climbers, people go to the bottom ocean, that kind of thing. And in that grand tradition, tonight is our member showcase, where members from the club will bring up artifacts they've collected amongst their adventures. And so kind of an interesting question of like, what is something in an antique store or what is something in a museum? Well, something in the museum was collected by a person, and that person gave that object a story. And you're going to share these stories about these amazing objects tonight. Richard, thank you for joining us. Thank you for coming to the stage. You've been to every continent how many times?
5 times.
And you've been to how many countries?
206.
How many countries are there?
It depends upon the list you use. If you're going the United Nations authorized countries, it's 198, and I've been to 147. If you use the Traveler Century Club list of 327, I've been to 206.
And are those like the disputed territories?
Well, it's also remote locations. Traveler Century Club uses places like Alaska and Hawaii as remote locations, and islands off the coast of Newfoundland, etc. So all of those are. What are you trying to tell me?
Do you want your bag?
No, it's empty. Oh. I got my artifacts up here. Anyway.
Could you talk to the camera and the World Wide Web? So, yeah, thank you.
So anyway, the longer list is remote destinations and countries, and that's where I'm at 206. So I got a ways to go to get to 327.
Like the breakaway region of Kyrgyzstan kind of places, and yeah.
Just about.
All right. Well, you have a lot of great objects to show us with multi-generational, incredible stories, and let's begin with the plate.
Well, when I was growing up, my brother and I would sit around the dining room table, and my dad would tell us about his adventures when he graduated from Harvard University.
Could you talk to the camera? Sorry, yeah, I know it's so natural. Yeah.
And one of the things he told us about was he had the honor of going on the second Byrd Antarctic expedition. Admiral Richard E. Byrd had an expedition to Antarctica in 1929, and he had another one in 1933, and my dad got to go on that. There were a number of sponsoring companies and organizations, and one of them was a China manufacturing company, and they decided to manufacture some special dinner plates for the 2 ships that went south and went to the Bay of Whales, where they were located for the duration of the 2 years they were down there. And tonight I want to share with all of you, this is one of those original commemorative plates. It's got images of the 2 ships, the Jacob Rupert and the Bear of Oakland, also known as the Bear of Soakland, and other images, and this is an original from that expedition. So as my dad was telling me and my brother about his times in Antarctica, that inspired me to want to go down there myself. So as I grew up, my plans were to eventually get down there, but in what capacity? And I went into the Navy, and one of my companions said, you know, there's a marathon that's being planned for Antarctica, and there's never been one held down there, ever. And that was 1994. And so I finished my 4th and what I thought was my last marathon. And it was scheduled for February of 1995. So I decided to go down there. And he and I ran the marathon with 96 other runners, and I had the honor of finishing in last place. So this is the buff that I wore around my neck for that particular race. It was on an island off the coast of Antarctica. It took me 7 hours and 25 minutes to complete it, but the terrain was unbelievable. Glaciers, streams, mud, rocks, sand, ice, snow, and all of the above. But I did finish, and that was the goal. So that was another piece of memorabilia. The chief editor of Runner's Magazine, because I was a marathoner at the time, decided to go down there as well. And he ran it, but he only ran the half marathon. And then he put together a feature article about the race in this magazine, which came out a few months later in 1996, and it's in here as well. What's interesting about the article in here is the first picture in it is upside down. He's trying to emphasize the fact that you're at the bottom of the world. So this is a neat issue highlighting that event. So that further inspired me to want to go down to Antarctica because I wanted to get closer to where my dad was put on the ice at Little America 2. And that was on the Ross Shelf ice up by the Bay of Whales. And so I said, well, geez, maybe I need to go to the pole. So a few years later, in 2011, the 100th anniversary of Amundsen reaching the South Pole, I timed my trip to the Antarctic to go down and reach the South Pole, and I did. I went to a remote base in Union Glacier, 600 miles from the coast, 600 miles from the pole, and got into a 1942 vintage DC-3, the year I was born, and landed at the pole in the summertime because that, later in the winter, many years later, one of our fellow members, Wayne White, was the station manager down there. So while I was down there, of course, you have to hit the store, and I hit the store down there. You have to have cash, and it has to be the exact amount. And here's the South Pole T-shirt. Among $240 of other trinkets and trash that I bought while I was down there. So anyway, that's one of my souvenirs from that visit to the South Pole. And by the way, everybody needs photographic proof. There's the photo right here. The guy in yellow, that's me. Everybody else was wearing the red, which they rented. I already had the yellow parka because I got that when I went to the North Pole. And of course, everybody has to stand by the barber pole. This is not the geographic bottom of the world. This is the, what you call the publicity pole. It stays in place. And that's my travel friend, Bo, who I have been all over the world with him. In fact, I just visited him a few weeks ago. And here I are standing at the photographer's pole. So I've been down there 5 times. I did get close to where my dad was at Little America 2. But my other goals were to get to Shackleton's hut at Cape, Evans, and then Cape Royds for Scott's hut. So that's basically it about my 5 trips down there.
Yeah. Thank you. How did you feel when you reached your father's spot?
Oh, it was exhilarating. It was just really an incredible experience to finally honor his trip down there by being as close as I could get. Little America 2, by the way, has fallen into the ocean. That was just a section right on the edge of the Ross Shelf. And over the years, those bases there on the ice have fallen in the ocean. But I got within a couple hundred miles of that location. And that's about as close as we'll ever get.
You have some interesting themes in your life of kind of cultural transmission, right? Like the reason we run marathons is to celebrate the Battle of Marathon and the Greek conquests of the Persians that saved democracy, right? And then you almost have a microcosm of that in your own life with honoring your father through this other kind of specific journey. I was wondering, did you ever think in those terms, or did you see this reflected in other cultures you've visited and explored?
Well, my primary goal to go down there was to reach Antarctica because my dad had been there. But the marathon down there was a bonus. And that was just one of these, oh, by the way, one of my shipmates said, this company in Boston is organizing the world's first marathon. And do you want to go? And of course, it took me about 3 milliseconds to say, yes, why not? So we only trained 3 months. So we were inadequately trained, but that made no difference. We still slugged it out and made it. So that was a bonus for going down there. The other trips down there were to go to the historic sites, the huts of the explorers, and to get to the pole. So there were different reasons for going down there on each trip.
And what was kind of your psychological sense of history being in the place as opposed to knowing of the place from your historical studies?
Oh gosh, I've always been a Shackleton fan, and I've been to South Georgia a couple of times, and I have walked along his route there on Georgia Island, South Georgia Island, and it's just sort of nice to be in the area where the great explorers have been. So that was sort of another lure of getting down there. It was just sort of putting myself down there as a follow-on.
Is there a specific story your father told you about that specific plate?
No, not that I can, no, not really. However, okay, that's a good question. There was one very specific thing that was very special, is when the entire expedition came back to New York, and they were all invited into the National Geographic Assembly Hall. And everybody was seated, all 52 members, including the Admiral, and the door opened, and Ruffles and Flourishes played. And in was scooted the President of the United States, FDR. FDR came in and arrived by wheelchair, and he handed out and personally presented every member of the expedition the second Byrd Antarctic Expedition medal and ribbon, and I have it. Wow. So that was sort of special. Yeah. And only 52 people have ever received that ribbon and medal, and I've got my dad's. So I guess that's the coup de grace.
Where's the ribbon?
In a safe deposit box.
Yeah. Then no one can see it, but yeah, it is precious. Wow, thank you. Do you want to add stories?
No,
or
I think that about wraps
do you
it
feel
up.
you've shared your things? Well, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
All right, now that we're doing, show and tell for Indiana Jones, who's next? Don't make me call on you. You in the back. Come on down. Woo. All right, Raymond, can speak into the mic, look into the camera, give us your name, number, ID, all that.
Hi, Raymond Castillo. I'm member 1233. I study paleoanthropology, and today I'd like to tell you about a very special hat I wear every day upon my head, and I think it's a great representation of who I am as a person and how I like to approach things. So this hat right here may look like an ordinary hat. It has a great journey, but this is actually a John Muir Collections hat, and I picked it up in Salt Lake City when we were headed over there to do some fossil digs and to overall just get away from LA, essentially. So I had a hat exactly like this one, just as you see it here. The only difference was that the band on it was thinner. Paid about $200 for that hat. And when we were crossing Arizona in the middle of the night, got out to use the restroom, and I stupidly left the hat on the roof of the car as I went to go use the restroom. So we took off, and the hat lost forever to time. The next day, we're in Salt Lake City, and I'm hat crazy. I'm looking online. I'm looking at different stores and different prices. Where can I get a hat that's just like the one I just lost? It felt like impossible at the time. I gave up. We ate breakfast, and before we head out into, Utah's wilderness, the Uinta Basin, to look for fossils and gems and minerals, as my permits allowed at the time, we stopped at a random thrift store we found on Google Maps, and I called ahead and I said, "Do you guys have any safari hats?" They said, "Yeah, we have a couple." We show up, and I'm like a madman. I'm looking for hats. I'm trying all of them on. None of them are fitting. Samuel back there, taking pictures. Out of nowhere, he nudges me on the shoulders, and there's a great picture just the second that he hands me this hat. But he hands me his hat, and he says, "What about this one?" And I hug him, and I'm like, "This is it. This is the hat." And I look, and I see it's a John Muir Collections hat. It's a little bit faded from here, but it's a John Muir Collections hat, and it looked more weathered than the hat that I had previously. The hat that I had previously was a new hat, it was fresh out of the box, whereas this
How do
one
you know it wasn't the same hat that through trials and tribulations found its way back to you? How do you know?
Well, two things. The band had somehow grown overnight, and second of all, his hat felt a lot more comfortable on my head than the former one, and that's because this one had already been worn. It had been tested, tried and true, and it has its battle scars. I can only imagine the kind of adventures that the previous owner of this hat had. And this hat would not only go on to accompany me in the deserts of Utah looking for fossils and touring museums, but it still accompanies me to this day. Every single time I leave the house, I never leave it without the hat. And I've heard people tell me that this is the hat that makes everybody look good. Nobody can look bad in a hat like this. But while I was in Utah, we stopped at the Vernal, Utah Field House. It's a museum. And they had these little plastic skulls for sale. They couldn't have been more than $5 probably. But they had dinosaurs, they had mammoths, they had all these things. And then I just happened to find a ape skull. And I said, that's the one. That's the one that's going to represent my whole thought process behind why I bought the hat and what I'm going to talk to you about. As a paleoanthropology student, I can go on for hours and hours about, anthropology, archaeology. But I think that the skull represents it perfectly. And these two papers on the side of it, they're constantly changing because they get deteriorated through rain, through shine, and through all the adventures I've gone on. But they usually represent some part of my past. And if you look closely right here, it says ACLA speech, and it was the speech I gave when I became a member here at the club. And on the opposing side is a former schedule from when I used to work at the La Brea Tar Pits on Wilshire Boulevard. But yeah, that's the story of my hat.
Cool. Why do skulls represent paleoanthropology as opposed to Lucy or something like that, right?
I think that there's something very innate or human about looking at a skull. I think that as humans, we often think of ourselves very superficial, like what are we and how do we choose to represent ourselves? But I think when we see a skull, even if it's a chimpanzee skull, we see our true selves. Aside from our politics, our nationalities, our beliefs, or our accomplishments, all we're left with is physical bone. And physical bone is what's typically preserved in the fossil record. So I think that when we see a skull, whether it's our skull or a fossil skull, I think we recognize that this was once alive. Or we might even comprehend completely that this was us, or we are the skull, essentially.
What was the first skull you ever held?
The first skull I ever held was a dire wolf from the La Brea Tar Pits. And it was when I first started on a internship studying animal behavior. And it was when I held the dire wolf skull that I kind of knew that I wanted to kind of keep on focusing on the relationship between wolves and horses of the fossils found there at La Brea and try to understand how ecosystems work when it comes to animal relationships.
Where do you think the original hat is now?
In wishful thinking, I would hope that another adventurer somewhere out there in the Arizona desert found it and, just like me, had a calling to it and took it wherever he went. In not so wishful thinking, it's probably deteriorating somewhere under the Arizona sun.
Yeah, but it's a dry heat. Cool. Is there anything you want to share about your hat?
I think I can end this best by saying a quote that I remember hearing a while ago. I was at the Tar Pits, and I was talking to fellow paleontologists, and I asked them, how do you guys tell paleontologists when you go to geosciences conventions or meetings or things like that? They always say the same thing. They say, look for the people that have the interesting hats.
The hat people.
The hat people.
Marvelous.
Thank you very much for having me up here.
Well, thank you for being you. Woo! Hat people! All right. Who wants to follow up the hat person? Or persons? Mr. Dietz? Mr. Dietz from the deep.
You better hold your applause until after.
All right, what do we have here, good sir?
I'm,
Could you pick up the mic, look in the camera, name, rank, all that? Like,
Andrew, that's just exactly what they'd expect me to do.
I know.
I'm Stuart Dietz, 1168. And Andrew, you're a very witty person, so please don't use it on me,
Oh,
okay?
shucks. All right.
Okay, so there I was, midnight, underwater, at the Marina del Rey breakwater, looking for lobster, and can I set that on here?
Sure.
Okay. I'll do it very gently,
Be
okay?
ashamed to waste a table.
Yeah, so there I was underwater looking for lobster, diving by myself. There were 5 other divers in the water, but they pretty much go separately. And we're all very experienced divers. And I'm out of air, I'm low on air, and I've already got my lobsters, and I turn to navigate back to the boat with my compass, because I have a pretty good idea where the boat is. And I'm swimming along the sand bottom, and the only part I see of this is that. just that little part. You can see where the rust stops. I just see that part right there. But I instantly knew what it was because I've hauled on enough anchors to know that's, what do you call that, the hasp? Rich Abele, what do you call that part of the anchor? The hole. Okay, I saw the hole. I saw it in.
It's not very nautical.
No,
Yeah, just pick up the hole.
Whatever it is, okay? So anyway, I dug it out, and then I did something you're not supposed to do as a diver. I used, because it's kind of heavy, right? I filled up my vest, inflated my BC, my buoyancy compensator device, and I used myself as a human lift bag. You're not supposed to do that, right?
And why aren't you supposed to do that? Because of the...
I guess it's
your
dangerous
blood
for some
exploding
reason.
or something like that?
You could probably end up in an uncontrolled descent, which could lead to injury or serious death. I don't know.
That's right.
Well, it was shallow water, only shallow, 20 feet deep.
Well, no, your lungs could bleed. Why did you risk bleeding lungs for this anchor?
Because
It's what the kids in the...
Well, Andrew, you should know that as well, because it was there. And I wanted to find myself a souvenir, right? In fact, I'm so attached to this anchor, this souvenir that I found, that I'll let it go tonight for $25. Do I have any takers up here? Well, look, if you think it'll be happy if you would be happy to have it at the silent auction, I'll certainly donate that for the silent auction. But actually, it's probably still a perfectly good anchor. I don't know if you shoot a little WD-40 on it, and it's good to go. So I brought it back up to the boat, swam up to the boat, and were they surprised? Because they thought I had lobster, which I did. I did have some lobster, actually some pretty good sized ones. And I'm sorry, Andrew, but that's all the time we have.
Aw, well, thank you. All right. Bleeding lungs for artifacts. That's what we like to hear. Thank you very much, Mr. Dietz. Anyone else? Bueller? Zeman? Zeman. 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 Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Zeman. Yeah, please speak into the mic. Look at that camera.
Okay.
Name,
Thank you. This
occupation.
Bob Zeman,
Favorite
878.
ice cream. Yeah.
Retired CPA. And I'm a Catholic, and so therefore the Catholics have had a shortage of priests over the years, and so therefore they've had to bring in priests from other countries, and they've had a couple of priests from Uganda come in, and so that's how this all got started. I talked to them and was fascinated with them and had a little bit of knowledge of the country from my time in Uganda. And so I said, well, I'd like to go back with you to Uganda. And so I did in 2010 with one, and I had a great time. I went to Murchison Falls, and I took some other trips there. And while I was there, I stayed in a girls' school. There were about 800 girls, young girls, early teens there. But they had a room for me, so I stayed there. And I was taken care of by a girl who fixed meals for me, so I ate very well. And obviously, I wasn't paying a huge price for the five-star hotel down in Kampala, but it was enough for me, and so therefore I was able to then pay $100 here or $100 there for trips around the area there. I went to Uganda twice. The first time was in 2010. The second time was in 2016. Over the years, I kept in touch with this girl through emails, and she told me that she was going to go to college. And I said, well, congratulations. It's probably very expensive. And then she told me, and it turned out I paid for it because it was very cheap there. And so the second time I went was in 2016 to to go to her graduation there and visit with another Ugandan priest there. I'm a bird watcher. When I first joined this club there, I noticed there were a lot of hunters, and they were interested in me because I was not a hunter, but I did study bird watching. Living in Santa Barbara, one of the reasons for living there is that bird watching is very good. We rank usually in the top 5 in the Christmas bird count every year, and there were about 4 or 5 professional bird watchers living in Santa Barbara. So I was able to pick up their techniques there. Obviously, the question is how do you make money watching birds? And these guys wrote books and they led tours around the country and even around the world. But they live in Santa Barbara because Santa Barbara has a very good habitat for birds. So anyway, after my second trip there, the girl and her friends gave me this artifact of birds. While I was there, I was fortunate to go to Murchison Falls National Park. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but they say that this is where the Nile River flows through an area that goes from a mile or 2 wide to about 50 yards wide. And so it's quite a bit of a commotion there at Murchison Falls. And obviously, if any alligator gets trapped there and gets taken there, they're stunned for quite a bit, and so therefore there's quite a bit of dead meat around there from fish or whatever's in the Nile River is right below there. There's quite a bit of dead meat, and that provides food at the base of Murchison Falls. So anyway, while I was there, they gave me this nice artifact that they carved there of birds. These are just ordinary carvings. I mean, none of them is specific to the birds of Uganda. If I didn't mention the reason that people go to Uganda for birds is the shoebill is the #1 bird there. It's not an endemic. It's also seen in the Congo as well as Uganda. But it looks like a prehistoric bird with a big bill, and I did see the bill in the zoos of the wildlife centers when I was there. Uganda is also big on birds in that the gray-crowned crane is actually on the national flag of Uganda, just like what the quetzal is on the Guatemalan flag, and a couple other birds are on our flag, on other flags of the country there. So I did have a good birding trip there. While I was there, I took a boat trip out to Chimpanzee Island, which was 90% of the island is for chimpanzees that have been relocated for whatever, and then 10% is inhabited by humans. And there's a big gate, a big fence across the island there, where people study the chimpanzees. I went to Jinja, where they have a plaque for Mahatma Gandhi, and that's where all the river runners start, which is right below the dam there in Jinja, and they go through these the rapids there. It's part of the Nile, of course, but that's the best river rafting there because most of the Nile is pretty flat there. I crossed the equator a few times, and I still keep in touch with this girl. She's now she graduated from college, and now she didn't get a job there. Unfortunately, Uganda has been ruled cruelly by numerous leaders. Everybody knows Idi Amin and the bad things that he did, but there was also the guy who succeeded him was a guy named Obote, and he only lasted a few years. Now there's a guy named Museveni who's been there for 37 years as an authoritarian dictator there. And whenever he doesn't like something going on, he'll shut down the country there, and so therefore people are stuck in their homes there, whether it's a pandemic or Ebola. And so the country has not progressed as well as it should, although there are Chinese firms there trying to extract minerals, and they found some oil there. And so anyway, Lydia now, she has a small little farm where she raises pigs and and also she raises chickens there. And we still have the Ugandan priest. He comes every year to help our priest here when he goes on vacation there. And I've enjoyed it very much there. I've ate well and slept well and saw a lot, and saw a lot of birds too. I don't know.
Incredible. Yeah. So what's the difference between a pro and an amateur bird watcher? Like, is there like a kind of rivalry? Like, get out of my habitat. You're an amateur. Or
Well, a professional makes money. I mean, when I go on bird tours, oftentimes around the country or around the world, I'll pay a lot of money to see the birds. But I don't. I'm a little bit beyond. I did go to Kenya with my wife, and we took the van around, and they say, "Oh, there's a lion over here." So they drove 2 miles because some other guide had seen the lion, so therefore they all went to see the lion, and they come back and they all saw the big five. And I say, well, wait a minute. Along the way, there's some great birds there, and you're not going to. They don't come out and display or they're not huge like lions, but it's great to see them because the fact that you can see them in action there, whatever they're doing. I mean, the hammerkop makes these huge nests in trees. They're just maybe 8 feet across, and it's fascinating to see the hammerkop there and other birds. I've seen some beautiful, not warblers, but hummingbirds there in countries there, and it's just that when a person is I'm just an amateur, obviously. I mean, most of these people, if you've ever been out with a professional, they will spot. Well, didn't you see the straight tail on that, or didn't you see the on the preliminaries the white bar? And so therefore, I don't always catch that, but I do my best.
so are they like bird whisperers that they're in tune with the environment, or they just have a different kind of eye that they can always pick out where the bird is?
Well, the professionals, I'm sure they scout out before they go, so therefore they know what to look for, and they study their area where they're guiding there. So therefore, they know what's there and what's possible there, and what's rare there, and they also find out in advance if there's any special birds that the members of the tour want to see.
Yeah, is there like a snow leopard of the birding world? Like, people know it exists, but no one's ever seen it kind of creature? Like,
Well, yeah, they're rare birds that they're always looking for. And I think we had a guest down here one time who found a bird that they thought was extinct in northern Ecuador, and he found it there. And I forget, there's a type of a bird that they thought was seen in Arkansas, and so somebody spotted it, so they sent 15 people down there, and they looked for 2 weeks, and they said, no, they didn't see it. So, yeah, they're...
the Bigfoot of birding, like, Hope, Arkansas, it didn't work out. So the shirt, is there a connection with...
Oh, yeah.
All right.
One of these, Uganda is basically a Christian country. The Christians went there many years ago. And, but as I say, it's always been authoritarian or dictatorship there. And the Christian priests there, they converted a bunch of youths down there to Christianity. And meanwhile, there was a confrontation, and the dictator said, either you worship me or you worship Jesus Christ. And they said, well, we worship Jesus Christ. And so he put them all to death in 21 martyrs there. And this is celebrated, I think, about in June 21st or something like that every year there, Ugandan Martyrs Day. And they have somewhere near Kampala, there's a huge church in a huge area, and people go from all over. And the Pope was even there one year to canonize these 21 martyrs as saints there. And so I went there fortunately, when I went there, it was not at Martyrs Day, and so therefore it was interesting to walk around there and see how they could accommodate 200,000 people in the field there.
Have you ever met Museveni?
No, I haven't. I met the bishop there. The bishop who was a head Catholic in Uganda, but and now I mean, Idi Amin was only in there a few years, and finally the Tanzanians threw him out there. but at least he had the trains running on time. But he did some bad things, and they got a lot of publicity. But Mussolini, with the way he shut down the country and the way that people are struggling there because they rely so much on agriculture, and even now there's a drought going on and Ebola going out, and Mussolini doesn't do much about it other than shut the country down so he can keep control of the country there.
Can you speak at all to the relationship of power between kind of the bishop level and the Ugandan government, or no?
Well, Uganda is a heavily Catholic country. I mean, the Muslims there are Muslims there, but they try their best there, but it's just that there's so many people who are poor there. Very few people have cars. They get around on bodas, which are like little motorcycles there, because they're cheap there, and the gas is so expensive there. And even now with the inflation there and the lack of fertilizer and the lack of wheat from Ukraine, and the lack of other supplies there, there's a huge percentage of the population is in poverty. So therefore, when I send them money there, they say, "Oh, great, you saved our lives and saved the lives of my pigs," or something like that.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Are there other stories you want to share, or how do you feel?
Well, I mean, I felt very fortunate there. I mean, on my second trip, I stopped in Dubai and had great food there, and a huge airport. I almost got lost, and I hope to go back to see more. There's Queen Elizabeth National Park, which is in the south. I do want to see a shoebill in the field, and also there's a place called Kibeho, and the Catholics believe strongly in that there are 3 places in the world where the Virgin Mary has appeared. That's Fatima, in Portugal, Guadalupe, and Mexico City, and also in Lourdes in France. But they say there's another reports of that where she appeared in Kibeho in Rwanda, which is just south of basically Uganda. And there's a nun there who says that she actually witnessed it, and nobody's been able to prove her wrong.
So you're going to go meet the nun?
Well, I'd like to.
All right.
She's very cloistered there. She's older now, but it'd be a real thrill, yeah.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you. All right. Others who have mementos. Yes.
I'll go if Jay Nunn brings his Siberian Husky.
It didn't have that kind of origin story. It was a rescue. But the future of it will be grand. All right, please look in the camera. Name, rank, title, favorite hot dog topping, that kind of thing.
David McAlexander, 1199. And if you know me, you know it's either going to be a story how the Navy, flying for the Navy, launched my life, or racing Porsches, and I have a story that combines them both.
Vanessa, show us the object.
So first off, yes, the object, the show and tell, and this is going to go to, I want to use one of my favorite words, credentialism. I want to talk to you all about adventures like, do we go on the beaten trail to walk the trail, or do we want to claim we made it to the top of the mountain? And for me, my mountain was earning this set of wings in 1989. Back when the Berlin Wall was still up, and I'm going to give a camera zoom effect so those at home can see the wings of gold. And I want to say fewer human beings earn these wings every year than are drafted to play in the NFL.
So what number is that?
I am 1320 in this job field. There have been 1,320 other people that did this before I did, and that includes guys who flew in Vietnam, and there were a lot of that. So you get to join this kind of long line of people you read about in books, and you feel, it felt especially good, again, coming from a short guy who had glasses and red hair, and everybody makes fun of the way you look because your hair is different, and you're... So earning the credential was pretty damn cool, and I'm going to tie that in, again, with the Porsche racing.
Could you elaborate
Yep.
the credential a little bit more?
Absolutely. Naval...
What did it credential you to do? Is that
So-
real gold? Did you test it? You know.
So since we have an Air Force navigator in the audience who I have tremendous respect for, but I must repeat the song we sang while jogging as a unit, which is said that, I don't know, but I've been told Navy wings are made of gold. I don't know, but it's been said Air Force wings are made of lead. Simply because Air Force wings are silver. No, wings are gold. These are not gold, but every aviator who earns one, I don't know anyone who didn't go out and buy themselves the 24-karat set, and mine is sitting at home. And I mentioned credentialism just because, like, Ray wears his hat, or we wear things. I often wear my wings because I want to try to tell the world I might be a little different, because it helps to have some ego to launch yourself off an aircraft carrier, or to let 4,900 other guys and gals work together as a team to launch you off an aircraft carrier. And earning those things let me do that 253 times. And if you think you're going to die in the next 90 seconds for 253 times, you come out of that experience differently. And it makes you want to smell the flowers. It makes you stop and smell the flowers. Not getting killed on the path of adventure makes life ever so sweet.
Aw.
And earning those wings literally launched my career. I mean, I went from being the guy in high school that people kind of knew who I was, but I didn't play big on the sports teams. Again, short. I competed. I used to ride in skateboards in empty swimming pools, but I didn't make a great career in that. I traveled overseas. I skateboarded in the French Open, and being an American, they put me first to go in this damn contest. And if you've never entered an international contest and they have you go first, not the best pressure situation. But I was trying to link that. Once I earned those things, immediately in the male hierarchy, there's this pecking order. And it used to be only men could have that job, but now women have it and do it really well. And shout out to the female NFOs in the E2 community. Because if you've seen the new movie Top Gun, the controller in Comanche that saves their butt from getting ambushed by the Su-57 is a female. But that not only launched my career, got me a job, let me buy a house with the VA, but it sent me to war, Iraq and Somalia, sent me to 6 of the 7 continents in 8 years, got me into an Ivy League law school, made my life what it is today. Had I not done that, I still think I might be living behind 7-Eleven in a cardboard box.
Hey, it's not too late.
So, yeah. So the other thing, and the way to tie that in with my hobby, I meant to bring this picture up.
I do have a quick question.
Yeah, go with it.
When you got to flight school, was everyone like with glasses and red hair? And they're like, we call you all radar. Or was there like the jock hierarchy thing?
So that's in the pilot world. And I was an NFO, a backseater. I like to say I was Goose, not Maverick. They also say NFO stands for
But
no.
all the NFOs, like,
In the NFOs, we're already used to being on the bottom of the hierarchy. If you've been on a sports team, you know, there's the quarterback, and then there's the special team guy, and NFO is like the kicker. Nobody actually gives them much credit, and yet sometimes they can lose the game if they don't do their job right.
so you found your tribe.
I found my tribe. I looked into going into fighters, and then I actually met fighter guys. And you need an ego to fly on any Navy plane, but to be a fighter guy, it's just, I hate to use the word testosterone poisoning, but there is such a thing. It's possible to have testosterone poisoning, and all those guys used to fly F-14s. And the tailhook fiasco of 1992 shows that the culture was a little too toxic, even for people that like that. So, but I want to
Race cars, woo!
race cars, and just like, here is a Porsche. And no one will say, that's not a Porsche, it's not a 911, and it's not red. And there's the old joke, a friend of mine who has a turbo says, yes, I own a Porsche turbo because I have a small phallus. But it's not red because it's not that small. Sorry for
That'll
the
be
joke.
another talk. Yeah.
So
Come on.
here's how this is connected. First of all, I get this job that starts paying me regular money, and I'm 23 years old, and I have some disposable income for a little bit. So I do what any reasonable young college graduate would do with a tech job. I go buy a 10-year-old Porsche, and I start racing it on weekends at Jack Murphy Stadium in San Diego, what people call Qualcomm now. It builds up to running on big racetracks like Willow Springs and Sears Point and Watkins Glen and Lime Rock and Mosport in Canada, where I've driven all those tracks. But you start off in a parking lot dodging around cones. And here's the hook at why I'm talking about this at this club. If you come to our night of high adventure and you participate in the silent auction, you can drive the right to race my race car in a Porsche Club of America autocross, where it's you against the clock. You're not going to hit any wall. You're not going to hit any other car, because there is no other car. There is no wall. You're running against parking lot around cones, and there's nothing to hit. So as long as you shift without going over the red line, you won't blow up my car. You can rent this car, which I have raced since 1989, and it is in the 90s and the 2000s and in the teens, it's been the fastest 914 stock class in California, Arizona, Nevada. It's not actually the fastest car in 3 states. There are other faster 914s, but they don't come to the racetrack every time there's an event and get all the points. I do. But I'm getting off the subject. Here's the real thing, how this car helped me earn my wings, because you go through training, and to have a, I'll tie this back to more adventurous club, the rites of passage, ritual, and hazing. Any team worth joining will put you through hell to see if you really want it, if you have what it takes. But one of the things the instructors always do is they'll mess with you to see if you're paying attention. In the airplane, they're constantly popping circuit breakers out of the panel to see if you notice, oh, my BDHI just went dead. I think I'm flying this one course, but it hasn't moved in the last 5 minutes. They're testing to see if you notice this. Because they're training you to fly not just an airplane in good weather when it's running well. They're training you to fly an airplane at night in combat when it's been shot to hell. And you're not going to make it back to the aircraft carrier. You'll be lucky if you make it over the water where you can jump out. So that's also why I drive and race used old cars, because having a brand new fully functioning machine is kind of, anybody can do that. When you buy a 10-year-old race car and you run it yourself and you're the mechanic, you got to know your machine, you know its limits, you know your limits. So I start doing that while I'm still in flight school, and I talked about how the flight instructors would mess with you in training. And one morning I walk out at NAS Miramar, it's about 1989, I'm near the end of the phase, just gotten AIC qualified, which means you can control other fighters in an intercept, and you can tell Maverick how to get right in the tail where he needs to be. And early morning, and we have to pre-flight the airplane, and I'll put in the other plug. The backseaters are still aviators. You hold an instrument rating. You operate the machine as well as the electronics. And I'm pre-flighting this airplane, and we have to do the same thing in school that the pilot and the co-pilots do, because you want 2 eyes to look at the damn plane and make sure everything's attached where it is.
In a few moments, if you could.
Okay. So I'm walking around this damn airplane, and because I've been racing these cars, and I've volunteered with my club to do technical inspections to make sure the cars are safe to go on course, I know that with the Porsche, if the exhaust is hanging low, your motor mounts might be broken. That's because the engine bounces around, and if it's out of alignment, bad things will happen. And you can tell just by looking at the back of a car if you know what you're looking at. And I'm walking around an E2 Hawkeye in 1989, and I look at one of the jet pipes. We've got 2 engines with 4,900 shaft horsepower each, and one of the jet pipes is not aligned in the exhaust. And I point this out to my instructor, and he says, oh, let me get let's go talk to the jet mechanics. And they look at it and say, oh yeah, it's got a broken motor mount. Plane's down, we can't fly that. If we tried to fly that, we'd be in real danger. And my buddy who was going through pilot training and was going to be flying up front did not catch that. And he gets a below average, and he has to go to a human factors board for not seeing a big broken bit on the airplane. And at that moment, training changed, because after that, like, hey, Mick Alexander actually saw this thing that the front end guys didn't see. Maybe playing with cars, maybe playing with machines made him mechanically tuned enough we can actually trust him in the airplane. And I got treated with a completely different standard after that. And it's like the switch from when you go from being the rookie on the team to where you're still the rookie, but the team has kind of accepted you and you might actually make it into the game.
So it's kind of like Zen in the art of motorcycle maintenance via jets, via your incredible car obsession, that where you wouldn't try to beat a person, you beat a clock. That kind of the...
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Are there things you want to add and subtract?
You can race this car against the clock, and if you've never done this, You think, oh, I'm just driving around a parking lot in second gear, but you're braking, you're turning, you're accelerating as hard as possible. Like a lot of the great things in life, it takes control as well as aggression. You got to balance the two. Too much aggression, you spin out. Not enough, you're slow. You can test yourself against the clock. You can come to our night of high adventure and have an adventure.
I mean, that
So
sounds
do that.
amazing, but doesn't the clock always win? Like, what are you doing?
Now that's a more profound question, but merely those who choose to test themselves have already passed.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Do we have others who have an artifact of awesome? All right. Well, yeah. Who has an artifact? You have to have an object. We can do Q&A afterwards. Ray, do you want to come on stage? All right. Is there anyone else? I think we have to close up after this one. All right. Raymond, welcome to the stage. All right.
Sorry, I'm a last-minute entry.
We'll look at the camera and apologize for sharing wisdom like this.
No
What's your
worries.
name, number?
My name is Ray Perez, number 1219, and today I'm actually sharing a story on my experience in Afghanistan.
All right.
And I was actually inspired by Rich Avely. I heard your stories about Antarctica, so I had to share. I wasn't.
Can you show the camera that? What is that?
So this is the number that I wore when I ran in the marathon.
There's a marathon in Afghanistan? And when was it?
So this was 2017, and it was the second Afghanistan marathon. There actually hasn't been an Afghanistan marathon since COVID happened. And now that the Taliban is involved, there hasn't been any marathon since. And this was an experience for me that was more personal. Usually I like to travel to confront fear. I tend to be that type of person that's always afraid of everything growing up as a kid. And I've gone to several different travel locations. And I remember Afghanistan. I was thinking, is this something I really want to do? Given what's told in all these narratives that are shown within news media or articles, which are probably rightly so. In this case, I had the opportunity to run it, and I decided I should do it after a couple weeks of deliberation, and I did it. There was a lot of key takeaways that was more than just my own experiences. It was also the experiences of others, and I think that's key when it comes to travel, because what I like to do is I like to visit cultures and actually connect with people. I had the opportunity to connect with different people who lived in Afghanistan, whether from Kabul or where the marathon took place, which was in Bamiyan, where the Bamiyan Buddhas are, and learned a lot about their lives. And usually I take away stories and lessons from them, and this is one of the experiences where even today I still learn a lot from that, and when I reflect. And so during the marathon, for example, there was another group that was running alongside us called Free to Run, and this enabled a lot of the women that lived in Afghanistan to run a marathon, to actually occupy space, because if they were to try to train within Kabul, usually they would have stones thrown at them, would go through ridicule. So this organization called Free to Run would bus them to a safe location to train them and allow them to run. And so the marathon itself became a location where they can actually exert themselves and run the 26.2 miles. Prior to that, I got to hike with a lot of the runners and hear their experiences, and some of their experiences was pretty harrowing, but inspiring at the same time that they're willing to take on this feat of actually running a marathon. And for me as a runner, I was running alongside them in the beginning, and then at a certain point, they all just started to pass me. And that was inspiring. But one of my key takeaways, and even today when I reflect on it, when I first told these stories, I would say how the Afghan men were impressed. And that may have been the case, but then I realized I'm actually projecting that. It was actually me that was impressed. And in some ways, I probably set a limiting belief on either a first-time runner or a woman runner, or someone who's just coming into a marathon, because I ran 10 marathons. And I think that limiting belief was just a projection that I had on that night, that day. And I think it took years for me to see that. And so a lot of inspiration comes, even now today, still keeping in contact with friends, is they continue to pursue running, even at a time when the Taliban has taken over. They still find a location, a safe space, because they've been trained to go out and run for themselves. And that's just reading, usually we are conversing through Facebook, just reading how they still have that passion, they still have that fire is really inspiring. And that was one of my key takeaways, is for me as someone who would always fear going out, to actually see someone that still has that strength and still continue to pursue and still has a perspective on the future and wanting to obtain that. That to me has continued my own drive to just better myself as a person, as well as kind of overcoming any fears when it comes to traveling to all sorts of different locations, so that I can live up to the standards as the rest of the members. So I'm hearing these really great stories, and it's like people are pretty remarkable.
They are. What else did you learn?
If I were to dig deeper, one of the things that I learned, which was a key experience, is there was a certain point where after the marathon, we went to Kabul, and we went to like this little rug shop, and behind the rug shop was a storage area, and we had met one of the generals of the Afghan war when they were fighting Russia back in the early 80s. And
So he was a mujahideen, or?
correct.
Yeah.
And so he had a very negative view about what the future would consist of. But I looked at my guide, who was Afghan, and I remember looking at all his photos prior to going on this travel. I wanted to see who I'd be going with. And a lot of his photos, he was like smiling all the time. There was just this kind of sunshine and beaming. And I remember looking at the trip before I went, was like, I'd like to be like this guy. There's like a lot of positivity to him. It's like, I want to be able to kind of ascend a certain mindset just like him. And in my own naivete, I was thinking that he has probably a pretty decent life. But during this discussion within the back of the rug shop where the general was talking, as a general was sharing his stories.
So the general has a pessimistic worldview. Your translator has a happy
positive
worldview. Yeah,
a positive worldview. But as we're like sitting there together, I think it was an opportunity where everyone was out to open themselves up. And so my guide was talking about how he, during the time when the Taliban took over, how he had experiences where his family was killed and his friends were killed. And it really took me aback just hearing that, because based on what I was looking at in his photos, he had this disposition that just, me, as I was saying before, led me to think that he had like this ideal way of living. And you know what? That may still actually be the case, because what I learned from that experience was that humanity has like a high threshold for pain. And even though through his experiences, where he has had these terrible moments in life, he's still able to ascend that. And I could say that just based on my own connection and that time that I had with him, you could sense his energy was very positive. And so that's just another source of strength that I tap into. When I think about when times are tough, I just look back to people who have it tougher, but are still finding a way to ascend.
How did you end up in Afghanistan running a marathon to begin with? And were you there obviously as an American?
I was there as an American, and we had to, dress in Afghan clothes, just so that we don't give ourselves away as being out of the country. I think with my complexion, I tend to blend in. In fact, one store shop owner was surprised that I was American when he heard me speak. He thought I was Afghan. But the way I heard through it was through an organization called Untamed Borders, and they're the ones that actually have these marathons or had the marathons. And I believe there's like one space left, and I took it, and I got to participate in it.
Do you think sport is subversive or no?
What do you mean by subversive?
Well, because you were talking about the admiration you have for the Afghan women who spoke to you, right? But the Taliban's against the marathon. But like, there's this ideal that, like the kind of 1902 Olympic ideal, right? That sport is a bridge between cultures, a bridge between humans. You compete with someone in like an Olympic kind of setting, and you're connected with that person. I mean, I guess that's kind of a political worldview, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's political. It can also be very personal. I think as you're saying, I never actually thought about it before until you just brought it up, that sport allowed for me to have these connections. And I think that makes having this sport valuable. I think that's something that adds value to culture. I think the other experience to that is, as I was saying, it allowed me to confront myself and my own kind of limited beliefs that I may have had about either others' potentials or, just a construct that I might have maintained that sport kind of broke. It may have taken time, but that was like the impetus where I could break from that. And so I could see sport continuing to be a value where as an individual you grow. And I hope to see that. I hope to see the Afghan Marathon happening again, so that people can have similar experiences and open themselves up to other cultures, and then to kind of question their own worldviews and construct.
Do the Taliban have sport at all, or do you not know?
I don't know. That's a great question. From what I understand, the people that I still keep in contact with haven't done any real sport opportunity, but that doesn't mean it's not there. It would just require research.
Cool, that's really incredible. Are there other things you want to share, or other wisdom you gleaned, or?
Well, I think ultimately, I hope at a certain period of time, one of the things that stands out about Afghanistan is its really rich history. It could actually be a destination if it becomes a country that other people are allowed to visit, because you have history that goes all the way back to Genghis Khan, for example, and all the citadels that he had ransacked, and they're there, and there's stories behind them, like the Red City or the City of Screams. You visit and you hear these stories. And there's also it's the center point for the Silk Road, so there's a lot of history to humanity there. And so, again, we can learn a lot about ourselves, and how that country is very central to our own humanity.
Yeah, it's peculiar. It's just been the death of many empires, but also, this great source of inspiration and trauma, and so I don't know. Why do you think that place in particular kind of buried the Soviet Union, it defeated the Americans, and it persists as this point of inspiration for you?
Yeah, I wish I knew I could go into politics. A lot of it, again, a lot of it is personal, but then extends into the people around me. And usually I look at the smaller picture than the broader picture. And the smaller picture does inform the broader picture, but at the end of the day, it's really about the individuals that I'm running alongside with, and then learning about their experiences. And then hopefully they could then, just from their own experiences, build upon the world that they live in, and hopefully inform me more about it, rather than just me reading through textbooks.
Oh, how beautiful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, are we on time? Does anyone have a pressing arrowhead or something? We could briefly do Q&A. Does anyone have a Q and an A?
There's a story there.
That's a story for another time.
I think there's a question over here.
All right. Yes, sir.
Oh, in your experience in the Navy, I was in the Air Force and a physician, and the families I took care of actually were off of the boat. And it was very stressful for everybody, especially their children and their wives. And actually, each wife would have a story about what they called was hitting the boat. It always ended so happily as it did with you. A very traumatic experience. Was there a lot of change, a personality change in the people who were capable of doing that and surviving it? Which included you.
Personality change, to joke, that would imply they have a personality in the first place. If you've been through extensive Navy training, especially Annapolis, like our president, some people claim they are there to train the personality out of you, so only a robot is left. And I'm only kind of joking, because you learn to compartmentalize things. There's David and your thoughts and the emotions, and then we got a brief for this mission in the next 6 hours. You might cause an international incident if you fly in the wrong place or do something wrong. You turn everything off. There is no more David. You are a machine. I like to say you're a Terminator. You're dedicated to the mission, and that's all you are for 6 hours. And then you land, and you get to go have a hamburger and become David again. That's a very useful skill in life, but also, like physicians, I understand you're a physician. It's easy to get over-obsessed with your work and neglect other parts of your well-rounded human being. I think anyone who's truly exceptional at their profession is not a very well-rounded human being. That's just the price you pay. And now I'll get a little even darker on that. I'll say, we got back from Somalia and we have to go through re-entry counseling, and I talked to the shrink, and he describes the typical naval aviator, which is twice divorced and semi-alcoholic. And that's the ones that are alive and home and happy. You got to pay a price to do anything. I am twice divorced. I don't drink anymore. I loved all the ladies I was with. I think I had a better life by being married more than once. I loved all the time I had too many beers. Now I'm a different guy. I don't have any. So life is all a journey. Lead yours. Hard.
What if you committed to your alcoholism and one woman? You know what? I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Do you have other questions? We have to move on. Yeah, Bernie.
Not really a question, but I have one last story. I'm wondering if you want to hear that about one of my flying experiences that I told back in the 1990s when I first joined the club. And there are a number of people here now who've recently joined the club who have not heard it and probably might be interested in hearing it.
Certainly, we're kind of out of our broadcast time, but could we do that over the cookies in the back afterwards? So I can shut down the camera and let Phoebe do it?
We can do that.
All right, sounds good. All right, thank you all so much for coming. Yeah, thank you all so much for coming. Please like, subscribe, share. If you're in the Southern California area, check out our NOHA event. It's fine, good stuff. And yeah, find your own artifacts, find your own adventure, and please remember to take care of yourselves and each other.